It started as a racket club that had maybe 1,200 members, something like that. Was not making money. Now today, it's like we got 20,000 members. We got 3 locations, and the location I started with is 2.5 times the size it was when I started. So there's just been all of these evolutions of change, and every one of them are risk.
How do you be in business, but also be a Christian? Thanks for watching at Harry's. I'm your host, Harrison Fredericks. Today, I'm joined by a longtime friend and mentor, Larry Welch. Thank you so much for inviting us into your home and having this conversation with me.
Oh, wow. This is, it's surreal for me. As I guess folks will find out as we visit, you and your family has been part of our lives since, golly, 1990, maybe. That's a long time. So I had the pleasure of seeing you grow up. So it is super excited to see what God's done in your life. And I just appreciate the opportunity to be with you for sure.
Yeah, I'm excited about this conversation because like you just mentioned, I've known you for a really long time. And a lot of those memories of being a kid is just me running around this house, having fun with your son Peyton and Grayson, and us just goofing off. Mm-hmm. And now flashing forward to me being in my late 20s, I'm a freelance video business owner, and I'm really trying to learn more about business. And so I want to go into a couple directions with this conversation. I want to learn about how to be a good business owner, how to be a faithful business owner as a follower of Christ. Mm-hmm. And I also just want to get to know you better. And I want to start with that last one. So tell me a little bit about your backstory. Tell me about your childhood and what that was like growing up for you.
Okay, yeah. So I grew up in a little town, it's Franklinton, Louisiana. It's a little town of about 3,000 people. My dad was a blue collar worker. He worked for the utility company in town, and grew up in a loving family with not a lot of material possessions, but man, they loved us so well. But also, Harrison, my childhood was really had a lot of tragedy in it. One of the things that happened is that I had a sister that was severely disabled, that was 3-4 years older than me. But by the time I was 9 years old, she had 27 major operations, and just severely disabled, and had a lot of pain. And so I kind of grew up around that. And when I was 9 years old, during one of those operations, she did not pull through. And so I had a sister that died when I was young. And so growing up in that, it sets a certain mindset of the world, like everything is not roses all the time, like bad things happen. And it's actually 2 years after that, my dad was diagnosed with terminal cancer. So like lots of tragedy in my late, kind of going into my early teen years. But as God often does, God used that in our family in a tremendous way. I still to this day remember, because my dad's room was next to my room. And so I remember laying in bed at night and just hearing the pain that my dad was in, going through major radiation and all of that going on. But at the same time, I began to understand his faith and his trust, like when he was just crying out to God, knowing that God was his hope, and that I got to see him live through that at a very early age, and I just began to understand just the power of God to change families, to bring families close together, and that's what happened to our family. Is that God was very faithful, and even though my dad was given like 3 months to live, he actually lived for another there about 20 years. So he still died when I was a young man, but I did have my dad, all through my high school and college years, and I'm so grateful for that. Um, so that's the perspective that I grew up in. That that life has a lot of bad stuff. It just does. This world's messed up. It's fallen, right? But man, there's a God that loves us and is there for us, and can transform our hearts and give us the hope and the optimism. Like most of my days are filled with optimism, and I think that optimism started way back then as I saw God bring our family through those tragedies.
How hard was it for you to navigate those early challenges in your life? Did you have a mentor? Did you have a community? Was faith a part of your life at this point?
So there was a couple of things that happened to me, and it's definitely part of my story, and I think it is important. Is that I mean, I was a kid, right? I'm 9, 10 years old when all of this is going on, and it is. I mean, it's trauma, right? How do you deal with that? And so for me, it's like there was a lot of pain, and I wanted to get rid of that pain. And for me, the way to do that was through food, which I think in my culture, this is, it's like there wasn't a lot of drinking or any of that other kind of stuff around when I was growing up in my culture, but everybody, every ache, every pain was always solved with some kind of comfort food, right? And so for me, when I was a kid, I didn't know all that back then, right? But as an adult, as I look at kind of the things that I went through, without a doubt, I used food to cope, like in big, big ways. So by the time I was, fifth or sixth grade, like I was incredibly obese, right? And that'll come back into my story, right? Because as you know, and I guess folks will find out, is that the health and fitness journey has been central to my life all of these years. So that was the one thing that happened. But secondly, without a doubt, my dad and his faith was absolutely. I mean, my dad's my hero, and he's the kind of the shining example of how to love and how to serve others in the midst of so much tragedy in his own life. Like I saw him live that out day to day, and I, as the years go by, I appreciate it more. As I'm, now that I have grown kids, and all these things are starting to come full circle. I really appreciate him for sure.
At what point in your life did the idea of being a business owner come into play? Did you ever expect that you would be where you are today?
So, okay, the answer to the second part of that question is absolutely not. Once again, I grew up in I would have never imagined the life that God has blessed me with, like in any realm, whether it would be an entrepreneur, where it would be the financial success, where there would be my wife, who was just awesome, or my kids, or how God has just become more and more precious to me over the years. Like, I don't think I would have imagined any of that at all. But I do think that, that God was preparing me for this year. As I think back on it, my dad, who was an electrician by trade, also was always a dreamer. Like he was always thinking of stuff. In fact, he reminds me of your dad, right? That just always having ideas.
He's
and
always
stuff.
coming up with
right,
something.
Exactly. Yep. And so one thing that we did is that our family bought a little country grocery store, way out in the country. I mean, like nothing around it for miles. And that little store was like, I think it was like a 40 by 40 cinder block little building. I mean, I'm talking, we can't even, yeah, you think of a typical convenience store, it was much smaller than that, right? And this was this little grocery store. But I saw my dad bring dreams to life in that little store. We bought that little store, and within 2 or 3 years, we started selling gas. So we put in gas pumps. But then he thought, you know what? Fishing is a wonderful pastime. So he decided we would sell fishing bait. So we dug these big giant holes in the ground, and we made these vats to put minnows in, so people could buy their minnows. And then we bought crickets, and we had worms, and we started doing tackle and so forth. He also thought, I think folks enjoy fireworks. So we had a little trailer, like a camping trailer, but 2 times a year for 4th of July and Christmas, we'd pull this camping trailer up to the side of this little store, and we'd sell fireworks. I mean, I remember being 14 years old and checking out people with fireworks and bottle rockets and all the stuff that we would get, right? And he did that. In fact, some people, because my specialty has been marketing over the years, and some people say, well, I do think God's kind of gifted me in that I can remember in Washington Parish, where I grew up, in this little parish in Louisiana. It's famous for its watermelons. In fact, there's a big watermelon festival every summer. So I remember early that a guy would drop off a truckload of watermelons, and I thought, man, we need to sell these watermelons. So I remember going out to the road and stacking all these watermelons in these cool, creative, symmetric designs so that it would grab people's attention and they would stop and buy watermelons. So I wasn't just the guy on the side of the road. I was spelling out, putting letters and doing all this stuff with these watermelons. So even way back then, I think, God was preparing me for that. And once again, my mom and my dad specifically, his creative ideas and his able to dream and envision what could be it's not in existence today, but through the grace of God, it could be. And let's go try that, right? And so it started way back then. And it just went from there. But I never would have dreamed that I'd end up where I am now, for sure.
It sounds like you had a really amazing opportunity to have some firsthand business experience. And that is so unique and so cool to have that as part of your life and part of your upbringing. When did Crossgates and a family fitness center, was that on your radar to build one day, or did it just kind of happen organically?
So no. I mean, it is without a doubt, my life is the story of God being faithful and directing things when I had no intention, or surely wasn't the specific goal. As I told you, that I was really struggled with not just my weight, because I did, like in my lifetime, I gained and lost 100+ pounds probably 3-4 times. Like I've just yo-yoed way up and way down, and it's definitely been a struggle, right? But it's deeper than just the food. It was like literally the emotional part of that, right? Where at least for me, everybody's story is different, but for me, it was definitely a form of addiction and coping and so forth. And so at times it kind of controlled my life, or it for sure was not providing me with the life that I wanted, right? And so those were super struggles. And I just think so many times God does all the work. The part that's our responsibility is simply to be willing. Like I just want to wake up every day and say, Jesus, you're welcome here. like I just want you to do with my life whatever you want to do, and that's my job, is to be willing. And so I do think even way back then with all those struggles, I did my best to be willing, to just to be open, and so I would try different things, right? And one of the things that I got into was like running and exercise, and it was just a way of, like, kind of combating these struggles. And I was living in New Orleans at the time. I was in my late 20s, and I had kind of left the industry I was in. I was in the electronics industry. For folks that have a few years on them, like literally, I worked for a company called RCA, and that's the Royal Corporation of America, and they were kind of what Samsung is now, or they were the dominant television, but in those days, VCRs and camcorders, those big old giant cameras that would fit on your shoulder and that you would use for home movies, they were all first coming out. That was the industry I was in. But I left that industry as a very sedentary industry, and I didn't know, I wanted to go in a different direction. And so after looking for a job for a little bit, this is the story of how God just works this stuff out. It just amazes me. But I thought, I just had this idea that, being honorable that I am, right? I said, you know what? Probably the prettiest girls in all of New Orleans, maybe they work at a health club. So I should go work at a health club. That'd be the best way to meet, right? And stuff. And so I just did. And I literally, although I'd been a professional, and run multi-million-dollar territories in the electronics business, I literally started at minimum wage I literally remember thinking, I'll just do this till a real job comes along. And there was a brand new club in New Orleans that was opening, and I just went in and met the manager and said, you can pay me or not pay. I just think it'll be fun. I just want to work here for a while and see. And God is so faithful. I love telling this story because my first day at work, this was in 1989. The manager's walking me around. It's a very big club. There's hundreds of employees, and he's introducing me to all of the managers. Pretty common, right? First day at work, let me go introduce you to all of your coworkers and so forth. And so he's doing that, and I don't remember meeting anyone except for this one young lady. And I remember walking into where she worked, and she was standing behind a counter, and she had these really cute white blue jean pants that were starched and beautiful, and this pink blouse, and she just had the biggest, most beautiful smile I think I'd ever seen in my life, right? And I mean, I distinctly remember that. And of course, God being faithful as He is, just 2 or 3 years later, she became my wife. So God was like taking me there, even though I wouldn't say that my motivations were completely honorable at the time. God knew better, and He introduced me to my wife, and so I started working there, and I loved it. And obviously, my wife was already working there, and she loved it, and so we fell in love with the industry, and so that's how it all began. And we worked there for about 6 years. And I'd learned a lot, had a mentor there. I was kind of like the second, by the time I left, I was like the second in charge of this large club, and he had taught me a lot. And I think those entrepreneurial spirits from my dad, kind of started bubbling up a little bit, and it was just time for us to leave. It was time for a new chapter, and we started looking around and looked at actually several businesses, not just the health club business, but I was in sales and marketing. So we were considering maybe trying to open an agency, like an advertising agency. And a friend of ours told me about this little neighborhood swim club in Slidell, Louisiana, that had been open for a few years, but had not flourished. It kind of was struggling, and that they were looking for a new manager. And I wasn't necessarily wanting to manage another club. Like I really wanted to be an owner and a creator and so forth. But we got to know the previous owner, and so through a series of events, he was willing to sell it to us. So in 1994, we started managing it, this little racket club, and then a year later, we were able to buy it. So we bought it in 1995, and that was the birth of what in those days was called Cross Gates Racket Club, because it was mostly tennis and racquetball and that kind of stuff.
Was that a ton of risk for you to take on, having been in the industry for some time, getting your experience, getting your feet wet, and also building up your responsibility and your status with the club in New Orleans, to then decide to pivot and want to be an owner and finding a spot that really needed some help? Was there a ton of risk involved in that for you?
You know, I guess when I look back on it historically, I go, man, that was pretty risky. You had this, but I had done that several times. Like I was had always been pretty successful at sales. And so I guess there was just a part of me that, worst case scenario, I can figure out something that people need and I know how to sell it, right? And I'll be fine, right? Kind of thing. And we didn't have any. We were newlyweds for sure, but we didn't have any children, and so I didn't necessarily have the pressure of that. And so I thought that my worst case scenario would have been, okay, it doesn't work out, I'll go do something else, right? Kind of thing. When I look back historically, that would have been a bigger struggle, right? If it really would have just not done well, right? I guess sometimes being naive is the best thing you have going for you, right? You just do it because you don't know any better, right?
It seems like that's a common thread among entrepreneurs, business people, freelance, is that you really have to take some big risk in order to find success. Because if you keep doing the same thing, you'll just never really change, or you'll never see growth in your life.
Yes.
So it is, and it's all different levels. The level of risk that you took is going to be different compared to someone else's, but it still is an uncomfortable feeling to get out of your comfort zone and to try something that you don't know if it's going to succeed or fail.
Yeah. And so some of this is personality type, like I'm the kind of guy that there's, I drive to work 5 or 6 different ways just because I don't want to do the same thing over and over. I'm just not, and so even with our company, I'm always thinking about the next thing that we are going to do, right? It is just not it's not satisfying for me to not be evolving and changing, and you can't evolve and change without risk, right? There is just bunches of it, and I mean, a little history of our company, but it started in with as a racket club that had maybe, I don't know, 1,200 members, something like that, was not making money, for sure. And now today it's like, well, there's we got 20,000 members, we got 3 locations, and the location I started with is 2.5 times the size it was when I started. So there's just been all of these evolutions of change, and every one of them are risk. Like, can't, like one of the things we did at one point is we doubled the size of the club, of our main club. And so, we went from like 30,000 square feet to 80,000 square feet. Well, that's a lot of money, right? To build all that infrastructure so, does that work or not? I mean, you obviously, as time goes on, I think we get better at the risks that we take because they're more educated. Like we know how to to know what are our better bets of success, but they are for surely not guaranteed, right? I remember my then there's the whole idea. Okay, well, I got got one club that works. Well, is the second club going to work? I mean, I think so. I think we can duplicate what we do, and if God is gracious and brings us good people, which is always the most important part of the whole deal. If I can get the right people, then we can change the world, right? And so, will all that happen? Well, I believe it will. But there's also been a whole bunch of things that go, okay, well, that didn't work. So we're not going to do that anymore. Let's go do something else, right? So there's a lot of experimentation. But I do think my personality is just a little more comfortable with risk than other personalities. And I think to be an entrepreneur, that's an important quality to have.
Fast forward to this year, and Crossgates marched 30 years.
It did, yeah.
First of all, congratulations. I mean,
Thank
that's a
you.
huge milestone for any business to be in business for that long.
Yes.
How does that feel?
It's Harrison, my first thought is that I feel so grateful and so loved. Like one of the things that happened is that to mark our 30th anniversary, about 20 or so of the key team members at the club, as well as my kids and their families and so forth, they all came in and they just celebrated Marianne and I, and I do. I just feel so grateful for that, and it also, I don't think I could tell you the story of Crossgates without the what a big role that Marianne played. Like most things, like we are a team, right? Now the roles that we have played over the years have changed, especially as we started having kids. But in the beginning, once again, Marianne worked in the fitness industry before I did, right? And so she was very competent, very successful in what she was doing before I ever met her. And it was definitely a joint venture, right? We just did so much of that, so much of it together. And so to see, and we even had a whole bunch of managers and like team members from the past 30 years that sent us a whole bunch of videos about how Crossgates had helped them develop as people and as business people, and that kind of. So super, super grateful for that. Once again, you asked me would I've ever dreamed, and the answer is no. I just would not have ever dreamed that of even just to be in this industry, much less to have a great organization. We have we kind of get more employees in the summer they're like lifeguards and that kind of stuff. But we average 350 employees now, right? And just to have that kind of impact, I feel like Crossgates is very much an institution in Slidell and in my community. It's like so many of the people grew up in and around our organization. In fact, we now even have third generations, which is so cool. Like, there's a mom and a daughter and a grandbaby all out by the swimming pools together. That kind of legacy is something I'm very, very grateful for.
30 years is a pretty significant milestone for any business.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that over the years, it has not all been sunshine and rainbows. And as the CEO, you have to manage that. I mean, it's your business, it's your company. You're having to look at what things are working, what things are not working. Can you tell me a little bit about some of the challenges that you face as the CEO?
Yeah, I told you, as we started, I kind of grew up around tragedy, and man, our business has not been immune to that at all. So, I mean, there's tons and tons of just everyday business stresses and responsibilities and hard things. People are dishonest, or or you make bad mistakes, and you hire the wrong person and it doesn't work out, or people misunderstand you. All those stressors are for sure are real, and we could talk about those, and they're very practical about anyone growing in entrepreneurship. But I do think it's important that, it's not like just everything fell in place. We officially bought this club. Just think about this. We bought this club in September of 1995. We find out that we're going to be having our first child in February the 1st of 1996. Okay? So it's like, whoa, so now we have this brand new business, which is like a child.
You got two babies,
right? And now we're going to have another baby. 3 days after we find out that we're having our first child, we have a massive fire at the club, and 80% of the entire structure burns down to the ground.
Wow.
So now I have a baby on the way, this brand new business with all of this debt, and I have no club. I have nothing to sell. And I was so consumed with how to grow the business, I hadn't really learned a lot of the back end of the business, and one of those things is insurance. So I knew that I was smart enough to know that we had insurance, because they kind of require it, right? If you're when you're in debt. But I didn't even know who my agent was. Like, I had no idea any of that. And so I wake up on it's a Sunday morning early. One of our boilers in the attic malfunctions. It was super cold morning, and the club burns down, and I'm going, what do I do, right? What do I do? What do you do? One of the things, and my wife was so good at this, she still is, it's like sometimes when things get very overwhelming, here's a first principle. Just do the next best thing you can think of. Just do the next best thing. And that's what we did. Like, I'm going, well, okay, so just like these things when I was growing up, it's like these things, it's an opportunity, if we allow it, for God to work these things out for good, right? What is that? Is it Romans? My mind's, is it Romans 8:28 that God works out all the goods who love Him and called according to His purpose? I think that's a big part of it, and I think Marianne and I really felt a calling to do what we were doing in Slidell, and so that was where our strength came from, and it was hard, man. It's like all of a sudden, it's like I have no building. And so within a couple of months, I had rented 4 large mobile homes, like people live in, those long, like 60-foot mobile homes. And I renovated one of them into the men's locker room, and I renovated one of them into the ladies' locker room, and I renovated one of them into like children's programs, and one of them was in childcare. In fact, this is a great story. That just so the childcare was in one of these trailers, and my little office was in the end of one of these trailers, right? And of course, the walls in mobile homes are like paper thin, right? The sound carries and so forth. I will never forget this. Like, I'm just trying to keep us afloat. Like, I got to figure out to cover payroll, and and so I'm on the phone with the bank, like, trying to work all this stuff out. And in the background, there's kids just screaming because childcare is going, and the banker's going, I just know. It's like, what were they thinking? Like, and I'm a kid, first of all, like, at least in their minds, I'm 32, 33 years old, right? And just so naive in so many ways. And But we just did the very next best thing we could think of, and we brought in all of these little mobile homes, and the swimming pools were still there, and the tennis courts were still there, and we had one little building left that didn't burn, and so we turned that building kind of into the half of it into a weight room, and the other half into like a group exercise studio, and that's where we went. And I just started advertising and marketing for that we were coming back bigger than better than ever, and that I was literally pleading for members to stay with us. Just just have faith in us. Just keep paying your dues, and we're gonna come through and stuff. And we lost some members for sure, but lots of folks stayed with us, and then we were able, a little over a year later, we built, we had a brand new building. It was better than anything we'd had before, right? And so that would be one example. And then of course the nation knows that was in 1996 was when this 1997 we opened this new building. And then, 2005, we had Hurricane Katrina, right? And at the time, we had grown to 2 clubs. And so when Hurricane Katrina happened, had major damage to my big club. My second club was completely gone, like gone. My house flooded, my church flooded, same school you went to, our kids went to, my kids' school flooded. Like it just wrecked our whole community, and for sure completely destroyed the revenue streams of the club, much less the structure and so forth. So we were just like right back in it again, right? It's like, and it was discouraging. I mean, I remember like, oh my gosh, it's like I'm doing this again. That feeling that you have to work so hard just to get back where you were. Like you're not growing and evolving. It's not the exciting part. Like I just got to figure out how to get reopened, right? How to survive, right? That kind of deal. But I mean, once again, and God just taught me some incredible stuff going through that, right? And also just taught me to really be thankful for the people in the organization, how much work they all put in, to just to rebuild and to clean up and those kind of things. And so those are just a couple of the hard things that we've gone through, and that's not even counting all the normal stuff, right?
30 years, a lot can happen.
Yeah, for sure.
Everyone who is a business owner, they're going to run their business differently based on their beliefs, their values, how they view the world. I know that from your perspective as a follower of Christ, that is going to determine a lot of things for you personally, but also your business. Yes. I want to touch a little bit on that topic of how do you be in business, but also be a Christian?
Yeah, one of the terms that I hate is that when people do something that they somehow maybe are not proud of or something, and they go, I get it, that's just business. Like somehow our actions, when it comes to business, you have to put your Christian faith aside. And I don't believe that. I don't believe it. Like I believe without a doubt that as a follower of Christ, that Christ living through me needs to be in control of the decisions that I make and the actions that I do and the relationships that I have and the way I treat people. Like that is the same. I'm not a different person whenever, and sometimes it's hard stuff. Harrison, I'm not a different person whenever I'm firing someone than whenever I'm changing a diaper for one of my kids that I love. I'm not. I'm still the follower of Christ that's just trying to do my best, not perfectly. My gosh, so many mistakes and things I would do different and so forth. But that's the motivation. And I think it's the same. Like like if I'm forced to fire someone, one is my prayer is always is that we are just not the right fit for a person, and that if they get that, the next opportunity they have will be a better fit for them, right? In fact, multiple times I'll try to even point them in that direction, right? That kind of deal. So, for example, here's another thing. Like, without a doubt, if a business does not make a profit, it can no longer serve the people. I can't do it. Like we have, we've covered, I've gone from one location to 3 locations, and I've gone from 30 employees to 350 employees, right? None of that happens without profit. It's just not possible. The profit that the company makes is what we use to hire the next person, or to build the next club, or to launch the next program, right? So you have to have that. And so sometimes, for example, I go, you know what, man, I've got budget situations, and we've got to cut some expenses, and sometimes that hurts people, right? Someone that's been working a bunch of hours is now not able to work as many hours, or the list would go on and on and on. So it's a tendency to say, well, that's just business. So now you're having to be mean because that's business. Like, that you're not a Christian anymore, right? You're doing something separate, and I don't believe it. They're hard decisions, right? Because as a Christian, my responsibility to the overall welfare of our organization, like to the direction that we're going. Sometimes that responsibility becomes a higher priority than maybe this particular situation, right? And so I'm constantly pray for wisdom. Like, Father, just give me the wisdom to understand the difference. Like, when is mercy and compassion and those things the highest order of what I should be doing right now in this moment, and when is it, no, just based on where we are, I really have to cut this back, and I don't see this person or this program fitting in where we're going. And so for sure you have to be willing to make those hard decisions. But man, I pray. It's my prayer that more and more every day I am allowing Jesus to live through me, and so those decisions are closer and closer to the ones that would put a smile on his face. That's what I'm hoping. Am I explaining that well?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I think you make a great point that we should not split our identity based on the situation. Or I think for a lot of Christians, sometimes it's hard to put yourself out there or put your business out there and say that, oh yeah, I'm a follower of Jesus too, at the same time.
Yes.
For fear of maybe backlash, or someone's not going to
100%.
support you because you take a stand for something. I guess, what can you say to people who may be afraid to do that, or they think it could possibly even hurt their business to stand up for Christ?
So I remember President Reagan, and I'm going to paraphrase this. And so but the essence of what he was saying was that at some point you kind of ignore the stuff out there, and you just do what you know is right, and in the long run, who you are will become, and what you stand for will become known, and so there's a little bit of you have less fear in that, when you're an entrepreneur, one is that I will tell you that the the business almost always is a reflection of your values, your personality. I mean, it very much is like it is like kids in a lot of ways. Like that your kids are going they will definitely grow up and get their own identity and stuff, but especially in the beginning, a lot of what they are is basically from you, right? And it's the foundational parts and so forth. And so a business is that, and Crossgates is still that. It's a reflection of very much of Marion and I and what we stand for and so forth. And every business has to side. I just am not. I tend to go on the side of grace and less on the side of the law. It's just my personal deal, and so I tend to lead with love rather than justice. Although all of those things are important, right? And so even in our company, like it is very, very, very important to me that non-Christians know that their opportunities of advancement and of growing in our company are the same as the Christians that work for us. And I feel strongly about that. Like I'm not going to create an exclusive opportunity and that you have to believe the way I do in order to progress in our organization. And for sure, it's not a requirement of our membership. Like in terms of our organization, we just respect members and allow them to be who they want to be, right? So the question is that what is it? Romans 1:16. It's like, but I am absolutely not ashamed of the gospel, right? And so in the midst of if someone asks me a question, whether it's once again, I'm not any different. I don't care if it's a business context or a parenting context or a hobby context. It doesn't matter, right? I'm a follower of Christ. And so my answers are going to be from that perspective. So any of my employees, if they're asking me questions or wanting mentorship kind of things, well, there's just absolutely no way that I can mentor someone without pointing them to Christ. I mean, that's because it's just been the essence of life for me, right? So I can't do that, but it's not a requirement. Like, man, I want, no matter where, first of all, no matter what how's the word I'm looking for? Different denominations, different thoughts, look at Christianity through a little different prism, of values and so forth. I don't want that to make a difference. I don't want their whether they're Christian or not to affect their journey in our company, right? I just don't want that. And so from that perspective, I have made sure that our company is that. Like, there is absolutely an openness. And if there's anyone in my organization that is a Christian and they want to share their faith with someone that invites that, man, I love that. I just love it. I said, praise God. I do the same thing, right? But at the same time, it's like there's no one at our front door that's that's just kind of demanding their attention and that kind of stuff. It's just like it's an open environment, and we are here to love and serve our members. And if you ever want to know the source of where my optimism and my hope comes from, I'm so happy and eager to share that with you. And that's the same rules that we put with everyone else in our organization. And we get criticized for that. I all the time. I get nasty emails that say, how can you play this secular music in a group exercise class you said you're a Christian. How can you do that? Right? That kind of stuff. I'm okay with that. It's like, well, that's a perspective, obviously there are values in our company. We're a family club, so that vulgarity and some of those things are just norms that we choose not to do. But I'm not going to say, well, we're going to only play Christian music in our group exercise classes, right? I mean, that's not the. I'm not even saying that's wrong. It's just not what Marianne and I have believed to be the best way to live out our faith, and so that's in turn how Crossgates lives out its identity.
As we start to wrap up this conversation, I wanted to get your thoughts on and just your general advice for someone who's in my position. So I've been in freelance business for about 3 years now. I run my own videography freelance business, and I was curious about any advice or any words of wisdom that you would give to someone who is, in year 3 of starting their own business and the ups and downs that come with that.
Yeah. Well, first of all, Harrison, it's been a pleasure to visit with you. Man, our families go back a long, long time. In fact, I have some great pictures. I was trying to find them this morning because I wanted to embarrass you on camera, but I couldn't find them. But just with you and your brothers being the similar age to my 2 sons and all the adventures that we did together, and then just to watch how God is evolving all of you, not just the boys, the girls too, but in our families, it's just an incredible thing to see. And so first, Harrison, I'm just so proud of you. And I'm proud that you answered the call to be a follower of Christ. That's a big thing. That's a decision. And especially in your generation, it's harder. It's harder. There's just so much more clutter out there. There's so much more of this whole idea that the rational world is the only world that exists, right? And that the spiritual world is this construct that we've made up, right? And that kind of stuff. And I'm actually in the, one of our slogans is that leaders are readers. So I'm just an avid reader. And I know a lot of the folks that are in your, especially in your generation that might be looking at this, they might not have even vocalized it, but they might really be dealing with doubt. Like, is this Christian thing? Is this just really a culture, or is it real? Like, and so forth. And so I was reading this a book that I love. The name of the book is called "Surprised by Doubt." I can't remember I'm terrible at. Anyhow, this is the book, okay? And it is Joshua Shortrell, I think is how you pronounce it. But anyhow, it's just a wonderful book that is open to the world and where we are and this whole ideas, and looks at it. And so if anyone is just having some doubts and they're curious, it's a book I'd recommend. Anyhow, I kind of diverted from your question a little bit, but it's just been on my mind as I look at the man that you are becoming. And my kids as well. Like, I'm just very grateful with where God is taking you guys. So to your question about an entrepreneur. The first thing is that you definitely want to pick something you're passionate about, but you got to pick something you're good at. Like, I have seen in my day, people come through the office and they're really passionate about something, but it's just apparent that God's just not gifted them in that particular area. And so I really feel like that that those those two things have to go together, right? The good news is that we normally enjoy things we're good at, right? There's because you get satisfaction from being good, and so I know that you have really perfecting your craft, and so I know that that's going well for you, and you're really talented, and you're moving in that direction. Once you get it going, like you're what, 2 or 3 years down the road
Yes,
now.
sir. Year 3.
Yeah, so it's a different world when you're. I have to answer it a couple of different ways. Like there's one more where you're like freelance, primarily just self-employed by yourself, right?
Yep.
Versus whether you're in an organization that's going to build a team, because that's kind of a different thing, and you might have that aspiration. So let me just look at it. Let me just talk about this in general, not necessarily you specifically. But I would say, I without a doubt, the people that you work with is just so vital. Like finding the right people that are willing to buy in to a vision and mission that you cast is just and being able to identify people that are good at those roles, those different roles, right? And those are the biggest successes and failures I've had in my career. It's like either thinking that someone was cut out to do a certain role, and they just weren't, or they deceived me, and so they were dishonest, that kind of deal, or being like, oh my gosh, they are even more than I ever expected in a certain role, right? And being blessed with that. So that gets to be the deal. I do feel business has an evolution to it, and so especially in the beginning, it is just about the process. Like it's about like, just let me create and let me do things that are worthy of doing, and let me think about ways I can get more people involved, whether that's on your team or as customers or as viewers or whatever it is. Like, let me just create and think about that, right? And then the back end of that, like, okay, so now we got to do budgets and control costs and leverage our debt and make sure this and that is right. That kind of comes later. But I think that in the beginning, the passion is just just doing stuff that moves people, right? That whether it's in any way, you're trying to do something that serves people, right? So now my job description, as my self-defined job description, is that how can I identify people that I can create a unique opportunity that they can reach their potential? Like that really is the vast majority of my job and what I do now. Because if I can pick great people and I can then give them the environment, like all the assets, the support, the ideas, the encouragement, like if I can give them all that environment that they can reach their potential, then then the future of our organization is super optimistic, right? It's like that many people going in the right direction, you pretty much are going to be getting better through that.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate all of the wisdom, all the advice that you shared, and even the stories about your past in this conversation. I'm really grateful for you and just the mentor that you've been in my life. You and Miss Marianne really have been like second parents to me. And so I'm so thankful that you guys have been in my life. So thank you for this conversation and sharing this time with me.
You bet. It's my pleasure, Harrison, for sure.